Rob Skiba.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Daniel Ott here from the Edge Television Broadcast.
Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Hey, I'm pretty good, man. You know, I was looking. I thought we had you on the program like a couple months ago, but I'm looking at the archives, and it's like a couple years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
What's up with that? Maybe we're in some kind of time warp or some kind of black hole or something.
You never know.
Well, I would expect, if there is a controversy out there about those kinds of things, I would expect you to do some investigation. And I guess you're and I like the way you put things. I mean, you are testing things, basic beliefs. And I think everybody needs to test. Every single belief that we have needs to be tested, because there's so much manipulation out there trying to control us. And everybody has an angle, Rob. Have you found that out in your years of humanity?
Boy, absolutely, that is true. Yes, indeed. And, Paul tells us to test all things or prove all things. And I think it's critically important. And some of these things we've never questioned. Mm-hmm. We've just taken it because somebody told it to us and never bothered to look into it for ourselves. And now more than ever, actually really since I did my first book, Babylon Rising, I realized, boy, we have been taught a lot of lies about a lot of things. So mm-hmm. I'm going to test everything I can.
Mm-hmm. And you said that right too, because I mean, even the simplest of things that we take for granted every day, that as truths that we don't argue about, we don't talk about. It seems like everybody has the same view. There are certain things, and of course, on those very, very basic things of agreement between people across all stratas, nobody ever questions that. But if you ever do, then you go into the nut house in their view. I mean, they might allow, say, a question of, say, 9/11 or whether we went to the moon, those sort of larger ones, and there's a division in the population. But there's others that everybody's in agreement. Of course, one of those is that the Earth is round, and so nobody would ever think to even question that, and even to say, well, what's the proof? Let's review what we've been told. And even if you don't come up with a flat Earth, you may come up with anomalies that suggest something else is going on as well.
Yes, absolutely. And this flat Earth thing is kind of taking over the internet right now. There's a lot of people looking into it, and one thing I found is, boy, if you want to see somebody get in touch with their inner psycho, just mention that you're looking into the subject. Mm-hmm. People will completely lose their mind right in front of you. Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. Mm.
But isn't that the programming from the system, a reaction that is built into us from our earliest years? Here, even without even thinking, we immediately attack the messenger. But isn't that a sort of a programming that we've all been through?
Well, it certainly seems that way. Yeah, and to be fair, I had the same knee-jerk reaction on this subject because when somebody's trying to get me to look into it back in April, actually for months prior to April 13th when I finally decided to start looking into it. But when people were trying to get me to look into it before that, I had the same reaction everybody else does. I ridiculed, I mocked, I said, look, this has been settled 500 years ago, this is stupid, blah, blah, blah. But there is a famous quote out there, you've probably heard it, that condemnation before investigation is the height of ignorance. Mm. And I've found that to be absolutely true. And I'm saying, look, what's wrong with investigating? What are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it is a fear. Maybe they assume that that you're borderline schizophrenic, that they may need to dig into some kind of psychotropic drug to talk you down.
Yeah. Well, especially on this subject, mm-hmm. Because it's something we all take for granted. We have all seen that globe since kindergarten. Mm-hmm. We've mm-hmm. seen it everywhere we look. It's globe, and now the term globalist and globalism has taken on a whole new meaning for me. And by the way, just to clear this up front, I still believe in the globe, mm-hmm. but I am testing it, and I'm finding that proving the globe is not as easy as you might think it is. Mm-hmm. And people, first thing they say is, well, we've all seen it, pictures from space. Okay, that's true. We have seen alleged pictures from space. But when you look on the NASA websites and websites like space.com and others that have pictures of the globe, they even admit it. These are composite images, mm-hmm. They'll say. Mm-hmm. And if you had an iPhone or an iPad, they, at least the older ones anyway, shipped with the background image when you first fire it up is of the Earth. And if you take that famous globe image and bring it into Photoshop or some software that you can use to analyze it, you'll see that there is evidence of the Photoshop clone tool being used like crazy. And the clone tool just basically replicates clouds or whatever you're using it for. But I mean, I've done an analysis on it. I've done it on the air a few times on Google Hangouts and showed people exactly where they are. And you're like, wait a minute. If they're taking full pictures, supposedly, of Jupiter and Saturn, and now we're heading out to Pluto, you're telling me we could take pictures of these huge planets, and the ones we have of our planet are composite? That's when I first became intrigued.
I got
when I first started looking at that.
I got one of those Insta reactions. I guess we could say instead Instagram Insta reactions. I was with my program assistant Susan at Starbucks, and a friend of mine that regularly see there. So he says, "What do you do?" And I said, "I have a internet television show." "Oh, what's it about?" "Well, we talk about aliens or apocalypse or this or that, and sometimes flat Earth." And when I said that, he goes, "Whoa, wait a minute! You're not a flat earther, are you?" It's like, there you go. I mean, whatever else I said, that triggered that reaction, and I thought it was really kind of funny. I go, no. I'm not flat earth. Don't go there, But on the other hand, Rob, I don't mind stirring up the pot.
Yeah.
So let them think that. Have a little fun letting them think that. But there are anomalies, like I said, and I know you must have come across them. You've done some good research. In fact, you've even created a website called the Testing the Globe, the Flat Earth Conspiracy. But of course now it also says it's examining it from a biblical worldview. Is there a contingent of folks out there? You said it's a hot topic out there on the internet. Is there a contingent of folks that are looking at this from a strictly secular point of view?
I would say most of the people out there that are looking into it are probably looking into it from a secular worldview. There are a couple of names that maybe some of your listeners may be familiar with. Matt Boylan is, I think, one of the forerunners in the modern flat Earth movement. And, if you believe his story, he was a realistic painter. He painted photorealistic images, and he was hired by NASA to do photorealistic art. And, I guess basically they were trying to pass it off as legitimate photographs, and he's like, wait a minute, I painted that, And some of his experiences within NASA led him to believe that what we are seeing of our Earth is not true. And he became a very vocal anti-NASA flat earther. And then there's two other guys, Eric Dubay has got a lot of stuff online, and another guy, Mark Sargent. And Mark, of all the guys that I've seen out there, he put it together in the most professional way. He put together like a series of about 11 or 12, roughly 10-minute long videos, each kind of by different subjects. And he just did it very well. And that's what caught my attention. Canary Cry Radio?
Yes.
Have you ever
Oh,
heard
yeah,
of those
certainly.
guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Gons and Basil. Well, they had interviewed Mark Sargent, and I was going to do my taxes a couple days before April 15th, and I saw that they had just posted the interview they did with Mark Sargent about flat Earth, and I'm thinking, what? Is this an April Fool's joke? I thought, those guys are kind of funny, goofy guys, and I figured, this is a joke. So I downloaded the radio program to listen to on my drive. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive. And I went into it rolling my eyes like, what is this? And then by the end of it, I'm kind of scratching my head going, well, shoot, that kind of made sense. So after I did my taxes, I drove back another hour and a half, listened to it again, and I was really intrigued. So I started looking up some of these guys and sent out emails saying, hey, I'd like to interview you on my show. And Mark was the first to respond, and I did interview him. And after that, man, I went hopping down that bunny trail, and I haven't been out of it since. It's been since mid-April, man. I'm obsessed with it because it's intriguing, man. It's not as cut and dry as everybody, including me, would think that it is.
And there are for the Christian folks out there watching the program, scriptures, I guess, that specifically, I mean, if you look at them, not like to say the Supreme Court reading the Obamacare verbiage and rewriting it. If you look at it for what it exactly says, it indicates, there's some scriptures that indicates there is a flat area. I mean, when it talks about globe, it doesn't, or round, when the earth, sits on the circles of the earth, it's not necessarily saying a ball. And I mean, Mark Sargent, and I'm glad you mentioned him, he was on this program, and when that was so good, and he mentioned you several times getting into us, and I was thinking, Rob Skiba's looking into that? And I said, well, I got to call Rob and get him on the program. Let's keep, if there's controversy, you got to kick it. You got to keep pressing. But there are a number of scriptures. Would you say, and I'm not been doing anywhere near the research that you have. I rely on folks such as yourself as I go to your website and your Facebook group. But is there more scriptures that indicate a flat or a square or anything like that more than, say, a round earth, or is there an equal amount?
There is nothing saying the earth is spherical. Nothing. And the knee-jerk reaction of Christians is Isaiah 40:22. That was like, the circle of the earth, Isaiah 40:22. And I have used that same exact verse myself. I used to teach creation science at a high school level for years. And I would use Isaiah 40:22, and many people do, where it talks about the circle of the earth. The problem is the Hebrew word used there is chug, and it means circle. It doesn't mean ball. And Isaiah, the same guy who wrote Isaiah chapter 40, uses a different Hebrew word for ball in chapter 22, verse 18, to be specific. He used the Hebrew word dur for ball. So this guy clearly understands the difference between a ball and a circle. Now, while a ball is circular and round do not necessarily equal ball or spherical. Like, for instance, you have a round table. It's circular, but it's not spherical. And when I was confronted with that, when I looked at that in the scriptures, I'm like, oh, that can't be. So, my cognitive dissonance kicked in. I'm like, okay, I'm going to look up everything I can find in the scriptures dealing with the nature of the sun, moon, stars, heavens, earth, etc. And I put together a very lengthy page. If people go to my website, testingtheglobe.com, and in the main menu, you'll see One Man's Quest for Truth is the first link. Scroll down to where it says the Bible and the Still Flat Earth. And on that link, I lay out all the scriptures. I say, look, first thing I did is I just put the scriptures there for themselves, just by themselves, without any commentary.
Okay.
And I said, what you need to do is throw out your preconceived ideas, because we all come to information with certain biases. And we have to do our best to throw those preconceived ideas out and just approach the text and let it say what it says for itself. And so when you do that, there is no way you're going to get a spinning heliocentric ball out of the scriptures. No way. And that's when I was kind of in a pickle, because I spent my whole life saying, I'm a Christian, I believe the Bible's true, I stand on it as the Word of God, and I believe it's the source for truth. And here's this thing that I've been trusting in for the source of truth my whole life, telling me I'm not on a spinning heliocentric ball. Rather, it's telling me that I am on something that's still, it's not moving, it's set on pillars, it has a cornerstone, it's circular, carved into something with 4 corners, it has edges, and it's under a dome, metallic dome at that, within which the sun, moon, and stars are placed. And, oh boy.
Wow.
I mean, that's why I can't get out of this rabbit hole, man, because I have, like you, I went to the same schools everybody else went to, and have seen all the same alleged proofs for the globe that everybody else has seen. So I've still got a lot of those things in my head. A fair amount of them, though, I've been able to debunk, at least in my own mind. But yeah, I'm kind of like Thomas at the moment. Thomas had heard the word, hey, he's alive, he rose from the dead. He's like, you know what, guys, I'll believe it when I can put my fingers in the hole. That's where I'm at right now. I know what the scriptures say now. There's no question in my mind. People can check it out for themselves and see what they think. But I know what the scriptures say, but I'm kind of like, I got to put my finger in the hole still. So before I'll hang a banner and say, hey, I'm a flat earther. And you know what? I'm confident that my Savior will meet me where I'm at the same way he met Thomas where he was at. So.
And it seems you have no problem poking the bear. You say poke, but I'm thinking about you're poking the bear there because there's certainly dogma attached to the globalist view of the earth, which by the way, that's a whole new I mean, all the programs, 'cause as you probably know, looking through my guest list, my older guest list, is that the guests are all over the place. This isn't pigeonholed to one specific genre, and so, we had, guests on that talk about various subjects, and so, when it comes to the flat Earth or the round Earth, whichever one it is, I think it needs to be up for debate. It needs to be examined just like every other topic.
Yes, absolutely. And this is something I found interesting just recently. Most of us have heard or have perhaps even said, hey, this issue was settled 500 years ago. When you get to Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, later Newton, this deal was settled. That's not really true. When you go back to their time, their day, you'll see that they didn't even receive unanimous agreement in the scientific community. There was a lot of people, their peers, who disagreed with their ideas. And this continued well into the 1800s and even into the beginning of the 20th century. And there's a series of books that I recently got off of Amazon that have led me to believe that this whole idea that we believed it for 500 years is just a crock. That's not true. Mm-hmm. There were certain isolated individuals who did and certainly did their best to promote the idea. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't been universally accepted, and even into the beginning of the 20th century, where you got people questioning the sciences that were coming up out of the 1800s. Mm-hmm. Charles Lyell and the age of the Earth, looking at this various strata of rock, and Darwin with evolution. There was a fair amount of scientists and men of God who were taking a stand against that new emerging science and saying, look, this is a bunch of crap, and here's why. Mm-hmm. So really, it's barely been 100 years that we have as the whole planet or Earth or whatever you want to say, the world goes. It's only been within about 100 years mm-hmm. that it has been accepted.
Okay, all right.
Largely because of NASA.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have this question from our live chat from Blue Man. It says, if the scriptures clearly teach that the Earth is flat, then why do you still believe the world is a globe?
Yeah, well, I tried to mention that a minute ago. I've got my own levels of cognitive dissonance to overcome. The flat earthers who are diehard, true and true, would say, dude, you got to let go of the programming, man. And I'm just being honest here. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. It was like all I dreamed about. So the reason why I joined the Army in the first place and why I went to flight school to fly helicopters and was trying to transition into Air Force to fly jets. That was my life's ambition. So I've watched lots and lots of documentaries and seen lots of things that are very convincing. But at the same time, in more recent years, especially since writing my first book, Babylon Rising, I realized NASA is not what I thought it was. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to paint a broad stroke and say everybody there is a Luciferian and they're all in on a conspiracy. I'm not going to say that. I'm sure there are plenty of good people, maybe even godly people working in that institution. But I've learned in the military that compartmentalization is one easy way to keep things secret. Mm-hmm. A private doesn't have a clue what a sergeant knows. You're not mm-hmm. paid to ask questions; you're just paid to do your job. Mm-hmm. And the highest level of the non-commissioned officer doesn't know what the lowest level of a warrant officer knows, and the highest level of a warrant officer doesn't even know what a second lieutenant, a commissioned officer knows. Mm-hmm. So it's real easy to compartmentalize information. And, the people pulling the strings, they know what the real deal is. Everybody else is just a mm-hmm. cog in the machine mm-hmm. doing their job. Yeah. But when you catch NASA in bold-faced lies that I have demonstrated, and twice on 2 Google Hangout interviews that I did with somebody, I took them to the NASA website live on the air, took them to the Apollo 17 page, the mission page, and Apollo 17 is the one that took the famous picture we've all seen of the Earth. It shows basically the continent of Africa. And you can see Antarctica, too. It's a really famous picture. Mm-hmm. That was taken by Apollo 17. So you go to that website, and I say, look, scroll down to where it says a scientist on the moon. And there's a picture of one of the astronauts planting, it looks like the American flag, or he's right next to the American flag, and mm-hmm. over his shoulder is the Earth. Mm-hmm. Click on that picture, download it to your computer, bring it into Photoshop, and adjust the levels. And when you adjust the color levels and the saturation levels, mm-hmm. you see a box around a rectangular box around the Earth. And I did this twice on the air and showed it to people, and in 3 or 4 days after the second time I did it, NASA updated that website and changed the picture. Okay? And everybody who's been following me on Facebook saw it, because I was like, look, we're going to have it. And I took a screen capture of the new picture, adjusted the levels with the old picture at the same time, incidentally at, I think it was negative 6.66 was the level adjustment.
Whoa.
And it showed up on the one on the left, but not on the one on the right, which was the new updated picture. So this has led me to believe, look, I can't trust these guys. There's things that seem credible, and you watch the video and you're like, man, it seems real to me. I mean, but then there's other things that say, no, these guys are known liars. So I'm still trying to overcome all that, which is why I'm still testing it. So even though the scriptures tell me absolutely, and I hear God, basically saying, let God be true and all men be liars, I hear that. I know that. Just like Thomas heard his buddies say, hey, man, he's alive, dude, he's alive. He's like, yeah, I hear you. Man, I got to put my fingers in the hole. And, I'm just being honest. That's what I've got to do right now. I've got to put my fingers in the hole. And so I'm trying to do a series of tests to test the alleged curvature. And I'm encouraging other people to do it, too. And I don't know if it's because of what I've been posting or just people looking into it for themselves, but a lot of people are starting to do horizon tests. And unfortunately for the globalists, the tests that Joe Blow can do for himself, not requiring NASA, the military, or the government for any help, are not revealing a globe.
Well, the same government that tells us the Earth is a globe is the same one that said, if you like your doctor, you can keep it. So I'm just saying. But getting back to the Photoshop, man, that's interesting, because when the White House released Obama's birth certificate, you can, and that thing you could just take and dissect that. And and you could see that it was pieced together. It was layered, and these guys are so dumb that they didn't flatten the layer. So you can catch them, with software, because the advancement with internet and software really is keeping us hot on the trail of the government and their lies. And some people would say, for instance, false flag events and various things that, that if somebody says something, you can catch it. Everything that's said out there, no matter how much, for instance, no matter how clean Hillary thinks she wiped that server, her email is probably in 5 or 6 or even 100 other computer servers right now. So, those aren't missing. So in the world of internet, it almost sort of levels the playing field, and we need to leverage that technology against what we've been told. And I think what happens is we start pulling the curtain a little bit back, and we start to see what's really back there, and then we become maybe more free or make decisions that are more empowering to ourselves, rather than just being drones that are being manipulated to facilitate the system. Here's another question. It says, this is from Charlotte Groth. She says, if the Earth is flat, why is it summer in Australia when it's winter in the U.S.?
Yeah, there's lots of those types of questions. Also, time zones and how come it's daylight here and nighttime there. I mean, those are all related questions. The times, seasons, time zones, all that. Best I can tell, and again, I'm no expert in this, bro. I've only been doing this since like April 15th, so I've got more questions than I have answers. But regarding that particular issue, this is what I understand: is that Genesis tells you the sun, moon, and stars are placed inside the dome. Okay, that there's a rakia, the word used for the Hebrew word for firmament, and that was what separated waters from waters. And within that air bubble, the earth appeared, and inside the same enclosure on day 4, the sun, moon, and stars were placed. And there's 67 scriptures referring to the sun, moon, and stars moving, 0 in reference to the earth moving. So, the counter argument would be, well, that's just written from the observer's, perspective. And when we stand on this earth, we look up and we see the sun, moon, and stars moving. Okay, fair enough, unless you believe that the Bible is divinely inspired by the Holy Spirit and written by men, and the Holy Spirit being of the Creator. So, if you take that view, the Bible is divinely inspired by the Holy Spirit, the Creator himself says, hey, this is the way it is. Well, maybe that's the way it is. And the flat earther model says that the sun and moon are in an orbit basically over this flat disk. If you think of like a CD-ROM or something, a disk, that being the earth, and above it is the sun and moon are moving sort of like on a record player. And what it does during the seasons is the circle gets tighter, like towards the northern area during one season, and then it kind of levels out around the equator for a while, and then it starts going out toward the outer rim for some of the other seasons. And that's how you get, extended day and extended night and different seasons, and blah blah blah. So at least that's how I understand it. I don't pretend to have it all figured out.
Okay. Yeah, I know there are a lot of questions, and here's one. This comes from our Fast Blast, Patrick from Nebraska. Rob, what about satellites? How is it GPS working with my cable or even dish network if the Earth is not spinning?
That's a great question. There was a friend of mine, John, down in Austin. He's a police officer, and he called me up one day. He says, "Dude, I got to tell you something. I just had this really incredible conversation with a friend of mine. He has a friend who's been in the Air Force for 15 years in GPS. That's his job. For 15 years, he's been in the Air Force working in the field of GPS. His job is to maintain the field that he works in, and somebody has to maintain constant communication with aircraft. They're flying high-altitude aircraft in AWAC. The airplanes have the big disc rotating on the top. He maintains contact with these guys. And my friend John didn't say anything about flat Earth. He just said, hey, I've heard rumors that GPS is all land-based. Is that true? This guy didn't even flinch. He didn't miss a beat. He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. All GPS is ground-based, meaning it originates from here. It may bounce off of things higher up, but it's all here. And he was saying it uses airplanes, they use drones, they use balloons, all kinds of stuff. And when my friend John said, well, what about satellites? The guy just looked at him and smiled. He said he wouldn't say anything about it. He just looked at him and smiled. I don't know what that means. That's just what I heard. Then I went down to, I was doing a conference in San Diego a few weeks ago, and we landed in San Diego, my wife and I. We went to get a bite to eat at a restaurant that was right next to the USS Midway, which is this huge aircraft carrier that's been turned into a museum. And I thought, oh, man, I'd love to go on a tour of this museum. We had time, so I went on a 4-hour tour of this amazing structure. I mean, they put a city and an airport on the water. I mean, it's incredible. Well, I'm like 10 minutes into this tour, and I see a plaque on the wall dedicated to the Midway, and it has the flat Earth model on it. It's what's called the azimuthal equidistant map. Wow. Incidentally, it's the same thing that's on the UN flag. The same exact map is on the UN flag. So I'm like, well, that's intriguing. Well, I go on a tour, and the tour guide takes us up into the navigation room. And I happen to be standing, I didn't know this, but I was standing right next to 2 boxes, which were the GPS navigation stations. And he was doing the tour, and he points to right next to me. He goes, see those 2 boxes right back there? Those are GPSs. One's from the 80s, one's from the 90s. He says, by the way, all GPS is controlled by the United States. We just let everybody else use the system. So, look, that's just what I have heard. and I haven't asked anybody. I haven't gone out soliciting this. This is information coming to me. I'm going, what do I do with that? I don't know. The other question is, okay, let's say, fine, GPS is all ground-based, but are there satellites up there? Frankly, I don't have a problem if there are, because if the sun and moon are the way the flat earthers say it is, and indeed the way the Bible says it is, then clearly there's some sort of environment up there that doesn't have gravity or whatever within which things are able to orbit. So if the sun and moon can hang up there, I have no problem with the idea that satellites can be, except for this. Satellites are located in the thermosphere. Now, it's called the thermosphere because it gets really, really hot there. Now, we were told on September 11th that 3 buildings fell at free-fall speed, and like after an hour of burning, 2 of them came down at free-fall speed, right, at temperatures below 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If these huge skyscraper buildings can fall because the steel got so weak and it melted and blah, 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 yada, yada, pancaked down, then how are these aluminum tinfoil satellites hanging up there for decades in hotter temperatures than that? So I question it,
Well,
and I think we should question it.
Yeah, well, maybe, getting back to whether or not we went to the moon, I'm just wondering if there was a dome, maybe it wasn't the fact that we couldn't really technologically get through the Van Allen radiation belt. Maybe they were really saying that is the dome, and nobody could get through there. But if there are So some people said they looked up and seen Skylab and different things like that in the space station. So would they be directly in this theory? We're not saying it is, but just throwing hypothesis out there. Could it be underneath that dome and some maybe attached to it or something?
Well, like the International Space Station is a big one people talk about. People think they see satellites too, and I really question that they see satellites because satellites about the size of a bus, and it's way up there in the thermosphere. You can't see something that big. Or that small, I should say, that high up. Now, the space station is bigger than that. And like I said, I don't have a problem believing that something could be following the same type of orbit that the sun and moon is. If the dome appears to be well beyond that, and I don't know how to use a sextant or anything like that, but, people who navigate on the sea and stuff, they use this device to figure out where they are and whatnot. And as I understand it, they have used this device to try to calculate the distance to the sun. And what they come up with is that the sun is about 40 miles across, and it's only about 3,000 miles up. That's what they say. So the dome obviously has to be beyond that, beyond 3,000 miles. So, how far up, I don't know. But it is interesting that what you said we were talking about earlier, regarding the space program. If you go back to, that's what I'm working on right now on my Gearing Up for Apollo series. It's just part of the testingtheglobe.com website. Gearing Up for Apollo, I'm putting together a timeline. And when we first started going down to Antarctica, all the way up into CERN, and where we are today with CERN. And I'm only getting into the early 1900s, but I've started to look into the 1950s as well. And from 1926, Admiral Byrd goes up to the North Pole and supposedly finds an entrance to inner Earth. Right. There's like a world inside our world. Well, that's incredibly fascinating if that's true, And for a long time, I was chasing down the hollow Earth stuff myself. Well, he leaves the North Pole and goes to the alleged South Pole. Now, you'd think that he was probably doing that to see if there's another entrance. Well, he spends the rest of his entire life going back to Antarctica, from the mid to late 1920s all the way until he died, I think, in 57. Well, they go down there. Now, one of the knee-jerk reactions on the flat Earth is, well, how come ships don't fall off the edge of the Earth and blah, 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 yada, yada. Well, if you just do a Google search for the coastline of Antarctica and look at all the images you'll see, there's about a 200 to 300-foot high wall that is the coastline of Antarctica. So in the flat Earth model, it's the outer rim of the disk. It's keeping everything in. So that solves the problem when nothing's going to fall off the Earth. Okay, you got a 300-foot high wall. Well, Byrd goes down there with a fleet. This is like the youngest admiral in the military, in the U.S. military. He takes a fleet of aircraft carriers, all kinds of stuff down there, and it's called Operation High Jump. Well, high jump, 200-foot wall, high jump. That makes sense. He comes back. He does a radio interview that people can watch on YouTube. I think it was on CBS. And he's on this news program telling, man, all the natural resources you can imagine are down there. I mean, coal and uranium, it's fuel the world forever, blah, blah, blah. And all these countries are going down there to check it out. Russia's going down there, China, Japan, everybody's going down there. Well, then they go down there on another mission after that called Operation Deep Freeze. This is where things get crazy. He starts losing planes. Planes start dropping out of the sky. Now, there's three schools of thought on why that happened. One, it was just too cold and the planes couldn't handle the cold. Okay, reasonable. Another one is they supposedly crashed into an invisible force field. And those who believe the Nazis went down there after World War II say perhaps that they had, done some alien technology or something and created a force field. Interesting. Okay. And the flat earthers are saying no. They just hit the edge of the Truman Show. They hit the edge of the dome.
Right.
Whatever happened, we don't know. But he was losing planes, and I guess he lost a boat or two too, or a ship or two, whatever. Everybody pulls out. Everybody leaves the continent of Antarctica. And they signed this Antarctic Treaty saying nobody can lay claim to this place. Nobody can build military bases there and say, hey, this is our spot. And nobody can go down there except with the express permission and approval of this international coalition of people who signed this treaty. So it's not like you and I can say, hey Daniel, let's book a flight and a ship and let's go down there and check out Antarctica. You can't just do that. You're going to go wherever they carefully guide the tours will let you go and no further. And so, and this all is like in the 1958-61 time frame. And then all of a sudden you have Russia and the United States doing high-altitude nuclear bomb tests where they're blowing up nuclear bombs, shooting them up into the sky, and they called it Operation Fishbowl. So you're like, wait a minute. Did they find the edge of the dome and say, hey, how high does this thing go? And they start testing it? That's what it looks like. And then Russia, we supposedly beat them in the so-called space race. And so, we beat them, so they just gave up? Really? They just quit? No. We're going up, and they kept going to Antarctica. They went there like almost 40 times. Russia was going back to Antarctica while we were doing the alleged space program. So
alleged.
These are and then alleged. And then you see things like the Earth is at we all know supposedly the globe is tilted. Well, it's tilted. If you look it up, what is the tilt of the Earth? It's 23.4 degrees. Well, 23.4 off of center, so 90 degrees being center. Subtract 23.4 gives you 66.6. And you're like, really? Seriously? These are the things that has me intrigued. It's why I'm obsessed with this, because there's a lot of really just interesting things to look into.
Okay, let's get to a couple more questions for you. It says, here's one from Dreamwalker. It says, what tests are you currently looking into to prove the theory one way or the other?
Yeah, well, there's a simple. I'm trying to figure out ways that Joe Blow, who may not have a lot of money, to do a test for themselves. And the simplest one that I could come up with, and I did a preliminary test already, and it worked, though the results are inconclusive, it still worked, is there's math, spherical geometry, that tells you what the alleged curvature is supposed to be on a ball, 25,000 miles in circumference. And basically, the first mile is an 8-inch drop. So for the feet of where you're standing on a flat surface, it will be 8 inches less a mile away. Now, of course, it's exponential. It's not on a slant. So mile 2 is not 16 inches. Mile 2 is 32 inches. Mile 3 is 72 inches, and so forth.
Okay.
So I'm going, well, you could go to Home Depot and buy a sheet of plywood, get some cheap plywood, 4x8, and lay it on its side so it's 8 feet wide and 4 feet high.
Okay.
Paint 4 colored bars on it. For each foot, paint a colored bar. Use a nice bright color.
Okay.
Right? And put it 5 miles away from you. Go. If you live someplace where there's a flat road, and you can test that with an altimeter to see if it's level, or the salt plains of Utah, or the ideal place is on standing still water. A lake, a reservoir or something. Okay. Where you got to find, it's going to be level. So you stand at the shoreline on one side, and 5 miles away, you set up your 4x8 sheet of plywood.
Okay.
And the spherical geometry says that your feet, the difference between your feet where you're standing and where that plywood, the base of that plywood should be, is 16 feet. Okay. So laying on its side, 4 feet high, that means, according to spherical geometry, the top of the board should be 12 feet below your ability to see it.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be. I can tell you that right now.
Wow.
I've already done it. You're going to see it.
You've done that test.
I did that test. I went to Academy Sports and bought a $30 telescope. So we're not talking a lot of money here. For $50, you get some plywood, get some paint, go get a 100-power telescope, and you can use your iPhone or smartphone or whatever. Stick the camera of your smartphone over the eyepiece of the telescope and see it.
When you did that, Rob, when you did that, were you shocked?
Sorry?
Were you shocked when you saw the results?
No, actually I wasn't, because we've all seen stuff across long distances, but the math says that you can't. I grew up near Quabbin Reservoir up in Massachusetts, and it's a big reservoir, and you can see a good distance across that reservoir, but the math says that you're not supposed to be able to see such things as that. Now, sometimes water does funny things, and this is what I'm looking into right now, and I think lasers may solve the problem. There's a number of people out there trying to do the same type of test, but using lasers.
Yeah.
Set up a laser at one end and, see if you can see it. Because water does things with light that's kind of weird sometimes. and you get mirages and stuff, like in the desert even. You go in the desert, if you've ever driven through like Arizona or Nevada, you've seen how in the distance the water, the land up ahead looks like water. You get this wavy thing going on. So, but you can see the mountains way in the distance beyond that. Like if you're heading out towards the Rockies, you can totally see them for miles. Oh, speaking of that, for miles. You ever listen to the lyrics of the song "I Can See for Miles" by the Who?
Yeah, of course.
It's like the Flat Earth. It's like the Flat Earther theme song, man. If you just Google the lyrics to that song, you're like, what? This is like the Flat Earther theme song. Wow. And you can. This dude Joshua Nowicki took a picture of the Chicago skyline from the other side of Lake Michigan, 60 miles away. Okay, that is impossible. The spherical geometry, 60 miles away, is 2,400 feet. That's almost a half a mile. The top of the Sears Tower should be like something like 800 or 900 feet below the horizon. You should not be able to see the top of the Sears Tower, never mind the entire skyline. And yet Joshua Nowicki took a picture of it. He sent it into an ABC News affiliate, and the weatherman got on the air and did this crazy tap dance about how what you're seeing here is a mirage. And if you watch that clip, he doesn't even believe what he's saying. He's like a prompter reading puppet, it looks like. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
I got a friend of mine, Rick Hummer, who lives near where that picture was taken, and he says, dude, we've all seen it. We've all seen the Chicago skyline. Well, you're not supposed to be able to see that.
Wouldn't that by necessity mean that Lake Michigan is a bubble? It should be a bubble rather than flat across the surface. It should be like a bubble.
Yeah, there should be
but
basically a hump between you and Chicago.
Yeah.
Obscuring your ability to see it. And that's what the guy said. He's like, because of the curvature of the Earth, you should only be able to see this from up in space, but the reason we're seeing it is because light is bending, because this is a mirage, and he calls it an inversion. Well, the city's not upside down. It's perfectly straight up and down. It's not wavy. It's not distorted. It's perfectly symmetrical. And it's not leaning away from you. If it's on a ball, the vertical perspective should be such that the top should look like it's leaning away from you.
Yeah.
And the sides should look like they're leaning to the left and right, because, the ball goes left and right as well as away from you. And it doesn't.
I saw that video of that news guy, and he didn't believe what he was saying. It's like, I got to read this, to show that it can't be. And so he come up this mirage business. That was ridiculous. It reminded me of this may veer into your controversial realm, where you might think I'm on the edge, but they were saying the mile wide UFO craft in Stevensville was a mirage of an airplane. Right. And I thought, come on, man, can you give me, how about just a weather balloon? How about give me one of that? Give me that excuse me. I'll take that. But mirage.
Gas.
Yeah. So, all right. Hey, listen, we're right at the top of the hour, Rob. I've got your website in our background right now at a Flat Earth Conspiracy. Why don't you tell the folks what's on that website?
Yeah, testingtheglobe.com. I've got two things going kind of at the same time. There's the One Man's Quest for Truth. That's sort of my own personal journey into looking into this. And then Gearing Up for Apollo is basically a timeline of events that really kind of starts with the Tower of Babel, and I'm going to try to take it all the way up to CERN.
Wow, the CERN Collider?
Yeah.
Wow, that'd be an interesting connection. It seems like we need to follow that up and see what you come up with on that. You already have data for that?
Well, I've got 3 out of about 6 articles written so far, so I'm not quite there yet. I'm still working on it.
Okay, all right, Rob, we're going to turn you down here for about 5 minutes. We have a 5-minute break, and we'll pot you back up, all right?
Okay.
Just stay on the line. All right, everybody, this is the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel. On our Newsmaker line tonight is Rob Skiba, and we're just testing the theory of whether or not the Earth is in fact a globe. We're just testing the theory. I believe there's some ancient text that says test all things. So let's do that tonight. If you have a question for Rob, you can join him in the live chat. Our moderator Jade will pull those questions and send them through a secret Skype channel that I'm looking at in one of these computers sitting on the desk. Or additionally, you can click on the Fast Blast link and it'll pop up in our email client as well. This show will begin to replay about 5 minutes after the show in our main player. We'll extract the high definition video. We'll put it up in our YouTube channel, podcast, and put it into our TuneIn Radio radio.com playlist. So you can listen to this exciting broadcast again. Next week, Greg Wrench is going to be with us. In 2 weeks, Donald Ware, retired United States Air Force, going to talk about the world. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Ott. If you missed any of this exciting first hour, it'll begin to play in our main player immediately after the show. Additionally, we'll extract the high-definition video off of the out of our archives that we're recording in one of our servers, and then we'll upload it, and it'll appear in the main player, and we'll play all week until next week's show. But you can find the show on our YouTube channel, and you can find it in a pop-up player in Rob's bio section. Now let's go back to our Newsmaker line. See, we have back with us Rob Skiba. Rob, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you.
Well, I really don't know what you're on, Rob, trying to convince us all that the Earth is flat and that there are, evidently the Earth is on the back of an elephant, which is standing on the back of a turtle. So I'm not sure we're going to believe that. But, really, if you think about it, that what I just said, it was a belief of an ancient civilization. I don't know if it was the Greeks or the Romans believed that it was on the back of an elephant, and then they were standing on the back of, maybe the Hindus, stand on the back of a turtle. I had that graphic in our background for a while there. But, if there was, Rob, let's just go there for a second. Obviously, you've stated earlier in the broadcast, I was being facetious with that last comment, but that you're not saying that the Earth is flat. You're saying you're investigating, you're testing it. What would you think would be on the other side?
Well, according to the biblical model, the other side of it is God. He's sitting on top of the reason why the firmament is metal, according to the text, is because his throne's sitting on top of it. Now, the book of Enoch goes into a whole lot more detail. It's quite a freaky place out there. Enoch describes getting to the edge, and he calls it a horrible place, a terrible place, where he's looking, outside. Presumably, he went beyond the dome in Antarctica, which is interesting if you read the book of Joshua, chapter 3, where the Enoch leaves this earth. He leaves it in a place of snow. So it appears that he went out of this earthly realm in the Antarctic region. So, what's on the other side? Well, heaven, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we have this question that came in. It says, it is a scientific fact that the moon has a rotation of 29 and a half days that coincides with the human woman's menstrual cycle. If that's true, why do we, on a non-spherical world, never see anything but the same side of the moon?
Well, I have never been able to figure out why we only see one side of the moon, even on a globe, so I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, apparently the supposed rotation of the Earth and moon is such that it always points the same way, but that never made sense to me, even on a globe, so I don't know what to make of it either way. Now, this is something else that's interesting about the moon, though, is both the Bible as well as the Book of Enoch say that it is a light unto itself. It generates its own light. It is a lesser light that rules the night. Now, what I call monkey man science, modern science, tells us that the moon is reflecting the light of the sun. Well, I mean, the sun gives off a warm light, a very specific type of light. If you take a reflector, like a white piece of paper or something, and reflect the sunlight, you get the same type of light. But the moon gives off a totally different type of light than what we see coming from the sun. Now, this last week, maybe last week or the week before, I forget which, but the moon and the sun were up at the same time. Anybody who was outside could look up and see the moon and the sun up at the same time.
I see it all the time.
Now, the moon was in a half-moon phase, so you had the Terminator line kind of right down the middle of it. Well, from where I was standing, looking up at the sun and moon, the angles weren't working right. I could see the sun off to my right and the moon off to my left, and if the sun is causing that half-moon phase, then the angles were all wrong, because the moon was off by about 20 degrees. You follow? Like the Terminator line was about 20 degrees off of where it should be based on the position of the sun. Yeah. So, that's one of the things I'm exploring right now. Is like, okay, if the moon is giving off its own light, how does that work? And how do the phases work? And how does an eclipse work? And all that stuff. I mean, I don't have the answer. I'm still asking those questions myself.
Well, back to the Earth and the metal dome. I remember we had a guest on the program talking about the moon, saying that he had evidence or has seen evidence that he said that the moon was actually in front of clouds, and he wasn't talking about the flat Earth theory. He was talking about a moon sort of hoax theory and saying that the moon is not really as far out as he said, and that in fact it's close to us, and it was in front of the clouds. And he said sometimes you can see that, but it meant that if that's true, that actually lends support to the sort of globe dome thing, that it's actually inside that dome.
Yeah, well, according to the Book of Enoch, the sun and moon are the same size, and if the sextant calculations are correct, then that's roughly 40 miles across and about 3,000 miles up. So it's, if that model's correct, then it's a lot smaller and a lot closer than what we were told. Now, the other thing we're all told is that the moon causes the tides. Well, we're told that the moon has 1/6 the gravity of the Earth, right? 1/6 the gravity of the Earth, and the moon is 30 Earth diameters away. So you could put 30 Earths, 29 Earths between this Earth and the moon.
Okay.
Well, if the moon is 1/6 the gravity of the Earth and it's 30 Earths away, tell me again how it has any influence at all on our ocean. I mean, if the Earth has way more gravity, way more mass, how come the Earth isn't pulling the moon in? Never mind the moon supposedly pulling the oceans back and forth. So a lot of this stuff just doesn't make sense to me anymore.
It's interesting. I really like this conversation because really it's a whole segment of investigation from a scriptural point of view. This really doesn't seem like it's ever been applied. What's in there on the actual scriptural basis to the idea of whether we have a globe or a flat Earth theory. What the Bible actually says, because obviously it's taught to us even from the clerical standpoint, the religious standpoint. They don't question the fact that the Earth is a globe, and you'll never hear that in a Sunday morning sermon. Here's what the Bible says, and so it's sort of up to us to look at it. But I was thinking how that the scriptures can mean one thing to one person and another, and I remember this one scripture that kind of shocked me. It says I'll read it two ways. It says, when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Lord will lift a standard against him. Well, you can also read that when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Lord will lift a standard against him, which is completely different, but it's the exact same scripture. And so I think there's a lot of these little jewels out there that just have never been looked into that are fascinating, really.
Yeah, well, I would say never within the 20th and 21st century. There's three books in particular: Zetetic Astronomy, Earth Not a Globe, by Dr. Samuel Robotham, or Robotham, I don't know how you pronounce his name, in 1865. Another one is 100 Proofs Earth is Not a Globe, by a guy named William Carpenter. And a third book, that was in 1885. And then third book, Terra Firma, Earth Not a Planet, Proof from Scripture, Reason, and Fact, by David Wardlaw Scott in 1901. These are three books written at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And these guys are saying, look, guys, this is what the Bible says. And they were saying, look, it absolutely argues for a still, flat, enclosed Earth. And Dr. Michael Heiser, he's one of these highly respected, super educated guys. He's an expert in Semitic languages, Bible scholar.
Talk to him.
He's got a video on Vimeo that he recorded, I think, back in 2010, where he says, look, this is what the Bible teaches. If we take a literal view of the Bible, the Hebraic concept of the cosmos is a snow globe. And he's absolutely right. I mean, if you take a literal view. Now, some people say, well, maybe we shouldn't take it literal. I said, well, okay, but that's a little bit scary, because then it means it's open to private interpretation and you can make up anything you want. I mean, Smurfs created us. Why not? You can make up anything we want to.
Yeah. Well, how is it that satellites, how do they stay in this model, or what is the explanation of a geosynchronous orbit of a satellite? What's the explanation for that? Is it stuck underneath the dome, or is it what's your view of that?
Well, first we have to address whether or not there really are satellites. I'm still looking into that myself, but let's go with the assumption that there are. If they really are satellites, now on a spinning globe, they say that they launch it into orbit in a very specific way, such that it maintains an orbit that's in sync. That's why I call it geosynchronous with the Earth. Now, if there's a dome up there and they could get to the dome, well, I mean, maybe they could just tack it onto it. I mean, who knows? I mean, at this point, I don't know either way. There's three possibilities. There either are none, or the Earth is a globe and it's just doing what they say, or somehow they're managing to survive the thermosphere when 3 buildings in New York City couldn't do that for a day, or maybe they are putting them up on the dome. I don't know.
What about geostationary? I mean, what's holding that in place?
Well, I mean, that's essentially the same thing.
Well, those are the ones that are supposedly taking. I have a spinning Earth globe in my background. I always wondered how a satellite could take a picture of a spinning globe, because it seems like it spins in about a minute. Every time I see a spinning globe, say from NASA or anywhere else, the Earth spins in a minute. But is that what? But it's not in a minute. It's 24 hours, right? So we know we're looking at a manipulated video or photograph. We know that.
Yeah, what you've got behind you, that's a 3D animation that somebody created. I created, and I showed this live on the air, too, in one of my videos. I said, look, here's a globe that I created in a software called View. You can get for about $300. And you can go online and download various maps, textures of the Earth that you can put on a ball and create it. And you can follow tutorials and create a perfect globe that looks better even than the one that's behind you.
Okay.
And I created one in 2006 that I used over and over and over again when I was a missionary, because we were doing global missions, right? So I was using that globe for lots of things to depict, traveling from Dallas to Kazakhstan or whatever, So I question a lot of stuff nowadays because I know it's what you are capable. Joe Blow can do with even a low-end computer. The computer I had in 2006, dude, I would have to create the thing on Friday, set it to render over the entire weekend, come back on Monday, and hope it didn't crash. And maybe I'd come out with what's behind you. So that's number one. It's too easy to fake. Number two, no satellite's going to get a picture of the Earth at the size that you have behind you, because the stratosphere or the thermosphere, they're not high enough out to get that kind of picture. You got to go millions of miles out. But when they did, the Galileo space probe supposedly took a time-lapse photo. That's why it spins in like a full rotation, like a minute, because they're doing time-lapse of the Earth. I think it was I forgot how many millions of miles away. It's on my website, Testing the Globe. And if you watch that video that was shot in, I think, 1990, it doesn't look like it doesn't look like the clouds are changing in 24 hours. Now, that was my first, when I first looked at it, when I first looked at that video from JPL, it didn't look like the clouds had changed at all. I went back and looked at it again after some people corrected me and said, well, actually, Rob, the clouds do change, because it does make a full revolution, so you can see what starts out over South America and it comes back around. The clouds, when it comes all the way around, are different. But when you're first looking at it, it doesn't look like the clouds are changing at all. Now, I could go set up a camera outside my porch for an hour, and you're going to see lots of cloud formations happening, in just an hour of time-lapse photo. So I still question it. It doesn't seem legitimate to me. People can look into it for themselves, though.
Okay, let's consider that, go a little further down this rabbit hole, as you so aptly described in the first hour. What would be the purpose, the deceptive purpose, to keep us believing in a globe theory?
Yeah, that's the big question. What is the motivation? And that's what I'm working on the Gearing Up for Apollo section. The first blog in the Gearing Up for Apollo section is called Architects of the Spherical World. The second one is called Examining an Ancient Motive, and that's where I go back to the Tower of Babel. And you see what Nimrod was trying to do. His goal was to reach into heavens, what King James tells you. But if you look in the book of Joshua and some of the other extra-biblical texts that go into a lot more detail about what his actual goal was, and he wasn't just going to reach his arm and go, hey, what's up? He had a plan. He had 3 teams of people that he was trying to coordinate, and the first group was to go in there and assault the angels. The second group was to go take over the throne room and kill God, and then the third group, I guess, was his group, to go in there and set himself up as the ruler of the universe. So that was their goal, was to kill God. Well, the entire ancient world believed in the snow globe. Really, up until about 1,500 years ago, things started to change a little bit. But still, the vast majority still held to that view, except for a few philosophers and scientists and whatnot. Okay. And then you get to the 500 years ago, Galileo, Copernicus, all that guys. Well, when they start questioning the nature that Scripture says of a still flat Earth on over which the sun and moon are moving, they said, no, that's not true. We're going around the sun and moon. So now all of a sudden you've thrown all those scriptures out. When you get to the 1800s, Charles Lyell shows up and questions the biblical timeline of the six-day creation. No, it's millions of years. Look at the strata of the rock. See, that was laid down over millions of years. And Darwin says, hey, that's cool. I like that idea. Because I got this idea that we came from monkeys. So they link arms and get together with Huxley, and they start putting forth this idea where they've questioned the timeline, and they've questioned the nature of man. Scripture says we're in the image and likeness of God, and now the scientists, monkey man scientists say, no, we're made in the image of from goo to you by way of the zoo, as Kent Hovind would say. Mm-hmm. So what they have done systematically over that time period is erode and totally destroy the foundation of our scriptures, Genesis. Mm. If you can erode Genesis and destroy the foundation, then how can you trust anything else? Because Jesus also endorses Moses. Mm. So if Moses is full of it, and he's writing stuff that's not true, then how can you believe Jesus? Mm-hmm. You see what's happening? So you create a paradigm where you basically put the Word of God into question. And if you can put the Word of God into question, then you can put forth any idea you want as far as our origins. Well, now that evolution has run its course, and it's basically bankrupt, you got people like Dawkins out there, Richard Dawkins, saying, well, it could happen, but maybe aliens came and seeded our world with the mechanism necessary for Darwinian evolution to take place. So now we got ancient aliens. But ancient aliens and evolution immediately go out the window in a flat, enclosed Earth system. Because there is no other worlds. There are no other worlds. You need that. You need the spinning globe in an ever-expanding universe. You need that model in order to introduce the idea of panspermia or ancient aliens.
Well, another, you talk about undermining the scriptures. One of them, of course, is used by the uncivilized left to say maybe the right, that judge not, what are you judging me for? And so really a lot of people have shrunk into this box and say, okay, I won't judge you, but I don't know that if that's a clear rendering that I see. It says judge not, but then the next verse says, but when ye judge righteously, and then it says, no, is not a wise man among you? Why don't you put the least of you in judgment? So there's a lot more to, that manipulation of Scripture is a control factor. But let me ask you this: if somebody logs onto your website, say an agnostic or say maybe a God hater, just don't believe, but just hates God in general, wouldn't they say, look, these lunatics are talking about flat Earth, man? They're saying it's in the Bible, so how can you trust anything in there? How do you answer that?
Well, they're already saying that. I mean, there's a reason why the atheist says, well, if you believe the Bible, you must be a flat earther. Because they know their Bible better than most Christians do. The only reason you got Christians in the pulpit saying that the Bible doesn't argue in favor of a still flat snow globe is because they've capitulated to monkey man science. They say, well, we don't want to look stupid, so we'll say that circle means ball, when the text does not mean that. Isaiah proves it in chapter 22, verse 18. So my counter-argument would be to that, look, if it is provable that we are in the Truman Show, then that absolutely argues in favor of a creator, because somehow how did this snow globe get here, and what's on the other side of it? We're in a terrarium, I mean, that right there, whereas a spinning globe going around an average sun and an average solar system and an average galaxy among billions of galaxies in an ever-expanding universe leaves way too many other possibilities open, apart from, a singular creator.
In a worldwide flood scenario, could we say or suggest that within that globe there was vapor full of water in that globe, and one day it just dropped?
Yeah, that's the old school. I used to teach that myself. That the firmament, the rakia, was essentially a canopy of ice or water, where Peter says the earth standing in the water and out of the water, and Genesis says separated the waters from the waters and the dry land appeared. Kent Hovind, Karl Baugh, lots of people have used the argument that the firmament was an enclosure around the earth. And I use that same argument myself, until you go back and look at the Genesis again without the preconceived notion of a ball. And when you do that, you see that, first of all, when we say that the firmament was the canopy around the earth, we're saying that in the context of a globe going around the sun. Well, the sun doesn't show up until day 4. So what's the Earth? It's already producing life and everything, doing for 4 days. Wow. Is it orbiting around nothing? I mean, when does it ever say that it's orbiting at all? When does it, when the sun appears, when does it say that the Earth spun up to 1,000 miles an hour at the equator and started rotating at 67,000 miles an hour around the sun? It never says that. Rather, it tells you the sun and moon and stars were placed in, not around, the canopy.
Oh.
And I had to look at that about 50 different ways, from Tuesday. Like, I'm going, wait a minute, I have taught this myself for years, the ice canopy. As recently as this past December 28th, I did a conference, and I taught that. And now I'm looking at it as soon as I erased all the preconceived ideas that I was bringing to the text, it tells you the waters were separated by a firmament, the dry land appears inside that firmament, and the sun, moon, and stars were put inside the firmament as well. In, not around.
Wow. It's amazing how you can read something your whole life. But let me ask you something, Rob. This is a question that I've been mulling over too. How is it now, if I took my beliefs, my core beliefs from maybe 20 years ago to now, there's been some serious changes in there. So how do I know that I was exuberant and zealous for those ideas and beliefs then that I don't believe now? How do I know the ones that I have now that I should be as zealous and believing in?
Absolutely. I was on a plane going to Kazakhstan in 2000, I think it was 2006. And the people behind me were talking about how 9/11 was an inside job.
Okay.
Wow. Now, at that time, I still believed, the whole trip, like 14-hour flight, these guys are behind me talking about how 9/11 is an inside job in 2006.
Sorry,
now, in 2006, I was still, sipping the Kool-Aid, man. I was like, no, it was, box cutter toting Muslim terrorists, like everybody else. And, third generation Army guys, patriotic as they come. I was fuming mad at these people behind me. Now, I didn't cause a scene or anything like that, but I wanted to get up and strangle these people. Like, how dare you, and they were quoting, like, Michael Moore, and I'm like, that guy, I couldn't stand Michael Moore, and they're talking about Fahrenheit 9/11. So I get to Kazakhstan, I do my thing there, and put all that stuff to the side in my head. When I came back to the States, I was upset to prove these guys wrong, because I remembered what they were saying. Now, I would never see them again, but I had to prove it to myself that they were wrong. Well, that's when my journey began into understanding 9/11. And my whole paradigm of, wow, I can't really trust this government that I used to be so supportive of. And then when you find out, when you keep hopping down the trail and you realize all of our presidents are related to each other. Not only to each other, they're related to one guy, King John Lackland. So all of a sudden my, rock the vote and, tea parties and all that stuff that I used to be involved with is garbage. And I went down all of these different paths from 2006 into 2012 that was destroying everything that I thought I knew so well. And by the end of 2012, I finally said, you know what, I'm going to start with the premise that I was lied to from this point forward, because it seemed that way about everything, from our government to, you name it. And that's when I began to question. And I think until people can get to that point where they realize they don't live in this happy wonderland where everybody tells you the truth. We realize there are evil people in high powers of position that lie to you on a regular basis. Well, then you're open, I think, to exploring things and maybe even testing the things you think you believe.
Well, yeah, it just popped in my mind, talking about believing the government. The woman named Ruddy, who was the keeper of Obama's birth certificate in Hawaii in a plane crash, she was the only one that died. So there does seem to be some keepers of the information there. But, I've come to the point now, Rob, where when I read a headline, just if you want to know the truth, read the opposite. For instance, they say there were a few rogue rioters in Ferguson. Okay, figure thousands. A few. Or millions of Americans approve gay marriage. Figure about 10,000. Just whatever the headline is, just look at the opposite, and you may be more to the truth if you read the opposite of what you're reading. You could start with that and then work your way back if they are telling the truth. But I wouldn't take whatever comes to me now after everything I've heard and seen and the variances to the truth that they really are. I don't take them as face value anymore.
No, absolutely not. When you realize all media, print, radio, television, movies, all media in this country is owned by 6 Luciferian-run corporations. all of a sudden you're like, okay, I don't watch mainstream news. I don't. And I think people who get their truth from mainstream news are the hardest people to convince about anything. Because if you watch people watching television, they are literally being hypnotized. They are in a trance. There's a reason why they call it television programming, because people are being programmed as they surf the channels with their remote control. They're the ones being remotely controlled. So until you can unplug from that, you're going to be stuck in some serious cognitive dissonance on just about anything.
Okay. All right, we have this question in the live chat from Raul Sanchez. Which theory do you believe in, geocentric model or the heliocentric model?
I'll tell you what, and this is very recent for me, but I would say about 90%, maybe even 95% convinced of geocentricity now. I've been reading quite a bit about it, watching videos and stuff online on it. I'm becoming now. This doesn't really have any bearing on whether it's flat or a globe, because even when people who believed in the globe, there are people who believe in the globe even to this day that argue for geocentricity. But I'm becoming much more convinced of geocentricity than anything else so far, and that makes sense when you think of, like, and even on the flat Earth model, a whole lot of scripture stories make a whole lot more sense. Like Joshua commands the sun to stand still, right? Well, how does that work on our standard understanding of the cosmos? For the sun to stand still, that means the Earth stopped rotating. Well, if the Earth stopped rotating, you got all kinds of problems. You lose the magnetic field, gravity goes out the window, and you got about 1,000-mile-an-hour wind shear because the wind keeps going. It's a very bad day if the Earth stops rotating. In Isaiah, the sundial goes back 10 degrees. Well, that means the Earth stopped rotating, went backwards, and then ramped back up to 1,000 miles an hour. None of that works. None of that makes any sense. But it makes a lot more sense in a geocentric model where the sun is what's moving and not the Earth, and it makes even more sense on a flat Earth model.
Okay. All right, we have this question from the Fast Blast, Philip in Georgia. If we use a simple plumb bob in two different places on the Earth, it would not measure as parallel lines if the Earth was a globe. I guess that's
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about that to comment.
All right, let's go to another question. Who, and this has maybe you researched, maybe you haven't, but who was the first pope to denounce the flat Earth theory? Because there was a time when I believe that they believed that's what it was.
Correct.
Did you?
Yeah, that I'm not quite sure either. In fact, I think Mark Sargent said that they never did denounce it. But I can neither confirm nor deny that. I haven't gotten that far in my research.
That's a good politician right there. All right, how about this? Guess 251. How do you explain the 26,000-year precession of the Earth? Does that fit in any model? There's some tough questions.
That plays into the issue of the stars moving, because the precession of the Earth, based on the globe model, the Earth is at a tilt and it wobbles, and over 26,000 years or whatever, the way we view the stars changes. Now, I'll tell you, one of the things that still has me a little confused regarding the flat Earth model is how come on the northern hemisphere the stars appear to be rotating in one direction, and in the southern hemisphere they appear to be rotating in a different direction. So again, we're dealing with our observation of the movement of the stars. Now, what I've been looking into is in both the Bible as well as the Book of Enoch, you have references to stars as angels. That apparently there's a class of angels known as the luminaries, and they are the stars. How many times do you read in Scripture, like Revelation 9:1? I saw a star fall from heaven, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. There are lots of references to stars as angels. So what if? What if what we're looking at out there are not really suns with planets going around them, as some would have us believe? What if we were really looking at intelligent beings up there that are told in the Book of Enoch to maintain a very specific position in the heavens and march on a very specific path for 6 God days? A day with the Lord is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. And if they don't follow the path that they're told to, there's a heavenly angel named Raguel, according to the Book of Enoch, that is the police officer, essentially, of the heavenly luminaries. And if they don't do what they're told, they get put into a terrible place of punishment. So if what we're looking at are not really stars and galaxies, but really intelligent beings, then that throws all that stuff out of whack.
Wow.
Now we're just talking about beings, marching in formation. So these are the things I'm looking at and trying to figure out.
Well, I was just
is
thinking,
that true or not?
well, when you were saying that, I was just thinking that coincides with the scripture that says we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and you just said that those could be beings, and if they are beings, there's a whole cloud of them up there, and they're looking down and seeing what we're doing.
Exactly. And if you watch The Truman Show, that's what's happening. In the movie The Truman Show, the spectators in the movie that are watching Truman are really the fallen angels. And you know they're the fallen angels because they're rooting for him to basically rebel against Christoph, who is the creator of the dome that Jim Carrey's character is living in.
Here's a great question for you. It says, if the earth is enclosed, is that in any way, the revelation of it maybe, in the end-time deception that's talked about in the Bible, is any of this connected with that?
Well, that's why I'm looking into it, because when I first interviewed Mark Sargent, I said, man, if what you're saying is true, this is the mother that gave birth to the mother lode of all conspiracies, Yeah. And when we talk about a coming great deception, it'd be so great that even the elect would be deceived by it. Well, this could be. Everybody's talking about weird stuff and crazy stuff maybe happening this coming September. And we've been hearing about disclosure forever. Everybody's talking about, the aliens are coming and they're going to be here in disclosure.
Right.
I believe all that, is part of the Great Deception. Well, that Great Deception is absolutely exposed as fraudulent if we're in the Truman Show. There are no planets way off billions and trillions of light years away. We're it. The Bible tells us that we're it. We're the main stage center attraction. There's nothing else but us. And when you read in Revelation that the stars fall from heaven to the earth like figs, well, we got a big problem if Betelgeuse and Sirius is, heading our way. But if these are actually beings that are tossed down to the earth, well, okay, that makes a lot more sense. And why is it that a lot of the UFO sightings we're seeing look just like stars moving around up there? They're orbs flying around.
That they do. All right, here's a question. Guest 251 from the live chat says, if the earth was flat, shouldn't I see on the ocean forever? Shouldn't just look over the ocean and see forever?
Well, in theory, yes, but you have atmospheric problems that would prevent you from doing that. Just the atmosphere alone with storms and waves would prevent you from seeing it, things like that. But the fact that we can see 60 miles across Lake Michigan, that shouldn't happen on a ball.
No, by the way, one of our viewers just said a while ago in the live chat that they are across Lake Michigan, and for 68 miles, they can plainly see Chicago sitting there.
Yeah.
If the government's if they're going to lie to us and say it's some kind of inversion, come on, man. Can you come up with something better? Most of us are living in the 21st century, so they're going to have to do a little bit better than some kind of mirage excuse.
Well, I got a test for that.
Oh.
And anybody out there who has the ability to do it, if anybody out there listening on the other side of Lake Michigan from Chicago, if you have a speedboat and a camera, well, get in the speedboat, point the camera at the city that you can see from 60 miles from the other side of Lake Michigan, point it at the city, and just keep driving toward it and see what happens. Because if it's a mirage, then the mirage is going to mysteriously go away, and then you should start to see the city roll up to you as you drive toward it. I mean, it's a pretty simple test.
Yeah,
so
I see that.
Somebody get out there and do it.
And by the way, I occasionally have put in your website snapshot of the series. What's going on with that? Can somebody watch that, or what's going on with that, Rob?
Yeah, man. I've been working with an executive producer now. It's taken me several years to get to this point, but I've got an executive producer out in Malibu, California, who's helping me right now. He suggested I originally wanted to shoot and raise money for the first 3 episodes. He says, well, usually in episodic television, they start off with a miniseries, which is 6 episodes. So he said, can you write 3 more episodes? I said, yeah, sure. He says, okay. You get to work on that, and then we'll get to work on raising. At that point, with 6 episodes, we'll need to raise about $15 million, which to me is a ridiculous amount of money. But in Hollywood terms, that's like a catering budget,
right,
on some of these movies. So that's where we're at. We're doing a lot of the legal paperwork right now to get things set up for being able to raise the money, legally, and do all that. I'm also going to work on a Kickstarter campaign to try to raise some of the money that way. In the meantime, though, I'm working with a team of video game programmers, and we're working on creating the first seed video game that we hope that can be used to also raise awareness and raise money for the television project. And I'm working on the comic book, the graphic novel version of it. So we're still very actively involved in all of that, trying to make it happen.
Well, that's an excellent title. It just seems like it fits just fits with today's culture and everything. It just seems good. I mean, the timing seems right.
Yeah, and right behind you, if you look at the logo I created, I created that logo back in 2009. Well, that's a flat Earth model right there. It's a flat plane with a tree sticking out of it. I didn't even plan that. The book of Daniel talks about that he had a vision, dream or something, of a tree that grew so large that the whole Earth could see it. Well, there you go. I didn't plan that back in 2009, but it's interesting that I'm doing this research now. I'm like, well, son of a gun. Look at that.
Well, let me ask you, Rob, is this before Avatar?
That graphic?
No, the idea of the tree. Because
that's right, the tree in Avatar.
Yeah, it was the biggest tree ever. The whole.
I don't remember what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole show was based on that tree. I think you're a prophetic man. You were looking to the future. Because
could be. Look at the tagline right there. It says the keys to the future lie buried in the past. I wrote that tagline and created that graphic back in 2009.
Man.
And now here I am looking into the past, and I'm looking at what basically is a flat Earth model now. Crazy.
Yeah, but crazy does sell. I was thinking about the. They're coming at Donald Trump these days. But what the press doesn't know, that there's an old maximum that says any press is good press, and he's running the press even with negative information. So as long as you're getting out there. But let me ask you another. I want to bring up another project I believe you're involved with, the Yahweh Triangle Virtual Conference. What is that? What's going on with that?
Yeah, Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahuwah, Jehovah. There's a lot of different ways that people pronounce the Yod-Hey, Vav-Hey. And I don't make this a sticking point. It's not something I get upset about or anything. Some people say Yahweh, whatever. I landed on Yahuwah as a pronunciation.
Okay.
But the Yahuwah triangle was something. Same time I created that graphic of the seed, I created another one that was on the original seed website that I did in 2009. That showed these concentric circles originating from the Giza Plateau and extending all the way out to just west of Babylon. And within those circles, I had a triangle. The 3 points of the triangle are based on Isaiah chapter 19. And the last few verses of Isaiah 19 talk about, blessed be Egypt, my people, Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance. And those form the 3 points of the triangle. So you have Egypt, Assyria, or Babylon, and Israel. And so if you connect the dots, you get a triangle. And what I realized as I was looking into this whole idea of a triangle based on these 3 points in Isaiah 19 is that the whole Bible really kind of ping-pongs between those 3 points, where you have something originating in Egypt, then moving from there to the Promised Land, Israel, and you can stay there so long as you're obedient to the landlord's house rules. And if you are not obedient, then you get booted out to Assyria. And if you learn your lesson when you're in exile, you get to go back to Israel. But if you don't learn your lesson, Leviticus 26 says you get 7 times your punishment, which is what happened to the northern tribes. Their initial punishment was 390 years. They got 7 times that judgment, which is 2,730 years, which just so happened to have ended, if my math is correct, in 2009. The Northern Kingdom's punishment ended in 2009. Oh. And so basically this series is designed to show what the pattern is, how it works in the Bible, and the book of Hosea specifically illustrates how the pattern works. And if you took a long time to learn your lesson, you got to go back to Egypt. So, you just always have this idea of something new in Egypt, going to Israel. You're disobedient, you go out to Syria, and, that's how it works. So that's what the conference is about. I did 5 presentations on that conference. It's all up there for free. People can check it out at BabylonRisingBooks.com /TYT for the Yahuwah Triangle, TYTconference.html.
Okay. Like I said before the show, I'll try to get a link up there for so people can get to that. Now, when's that, Nick? Is there a certain period that's on or time slot? What's going on?
Well, I did it already. I did it back in December.
So they're archived. Are they archived?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
That's all archived, yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I was going to say, as far as back to your seed project, have you consulted maybe with the Clinton Foundation for some money? Man, they got
I would never want to partner with it. I would never want to partner with any of those people.
Just saying, man. I know they got hundreds of millions. They got a stash, man.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is the borrower is slave to the lender. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to be slave to those people more than I already am.
We all are. Somehow we're going to be. And by the way, I know Valerie Jarrett said in 2007, I think it was, that those who are not with us, we will come against you, and those that are with us, we will reward you. And they've been doing that ever since. So, I got a feeling that Hillary's going to pull that same crap. So, all right. Any further things that we're going to talk about related to this testing the globe? What other little nugget do you think can you think of that bring us up to speed on that?
Well, I'll just say some of the things that intrigue me. Like I said, with the Apollo timeline that I'm working on, gearing up for Apollo, going back to Nimrod, my Babylon Rising book was showing how Apollo is a representation of Nimrod. Mm-hmm. And so there's this affiliation with Nimrod. Well, Nimrod was born in 1908 a.m., in fact, a.m. being year since creation. Okay. Well, that's where things got really interesting to me, because when they started to make trips to Antarctica, I mean, it wasn't until fairly recent times that anybody even had the ability to do it, because of the nature of the hostile waters, it's very windy, icebergs. It wasn't until modern technology could build ships to withstand all that we could even really think about going down there. Well, one of the big attempts that was made to go down there was in 1908 A.D. Okay, Nimrod's born in 1908 A.M. Shackleton is the guy's name, went on an expedition in 1908 A.D., and he did so on a ship called the Nimrod, and they called it the Nimrod Expedition in 1908. So that's what I said. I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? No. It's like, what was Nimrod's goal? Nimrod's goal was to reach into heaven. Well, if the flat Earth dome model is true, and Nimrod went up, he tried to go up to reach into heaven. Well, if the flat Earth enclosed model is true, there's another way to get into heaven, and that's at the ground floor. And so a ship named the Nimrod went down on the Nimrod expedition in the same year that Nimrod was born, 1908.
The shocking coincidences. I mean, at what point do coincidences become a fact? I mean, you can only say that's coincidence. At some point, it's no longer coincidence. But what you were saying. But what you're saying, because you mentioned Nimrod, this sort of domed idea makes a whole lot more sense when it said that they would build a tower reaching up to heaven. Because it seems to me they wouldn't have to build. I was thinking, well, they're going to build one in space. I've always thought that forever, but now I'm thinking, wait a minute, maybe they could have reached, and they intend. I mean, it says that God actually knew or said that they were getting ready to come up here. So how could that be unless there was something more accessible from a built structure?
Yeah, and the reason I thought that, now that I'm looking at this whole flat Earth topic and the biblical snow globe model, you have to remember that Shem, Ham, and Japheth lived for almost 100 years before the flood. They were there for, a good amount of time, about a century before the floodwaters came. So they knew what the pre-flood world was like, and they knew what happened to initiate the flood. And, of course, Scripture tells us the fountains of the deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. Now, David, writing thousands, maybe, or hundreds, thousands of years, I think, since the flood, talks about waters above the firmament still. That even in his day, divinely inspired, he writes about water above the heavens, above the firmament. So let's take a literal view. Let's say we are on a snow globe, and the snow globe is somehow submerged in water, such as there's water beneath and water above. Then a hole or a bunch of holes opened up in the dome, and a whole lot of water came through. Now, if the snow globe model is true, then the craters and stuff that we see on the moon and whatnot were from the Earth, not from space, and from whatever debris falling from the dome, presumably. Wow. Shooting up and pelting the moon. And if that's true, then they saw this. They saw this happen. They saw something above the sun open up and water come through. So being that Ham was still alive when his grandson Nimrod came up with this idea, Nimrod likely heard the stories of how the windows of heaven were opened, which would then make sense. Like, oh yeah, you're going to jack up, you're going to jack with us? Well, we're coming after you now. And the story starts to make a lot more sense if we take that view.
It's interesting to actually consider this topic. Next time somebody say reviews the text, the scriptural text there, and just kind of have that off in the peripheral, because there are some things that almost seem a little bit clearer. Interestingly enough,
a lot clearer.
So yeah. So there are multiple bases to look in and ask these questions that we're talking about. And I know that the Bible said to Daniel, seal up the things in the book until the time of the end. This could be one of the things in the book that's kind of been cracked open. And as the world gets darker, and I guarantee you, Rob, that what happened at the Supreme Court is we were just beginning to see there's a tidal wave of change coming that is way more than what that Supreme Court decision allowed. There's a tidal wave of change that's going to come against, and particularly the church itself, but other changes that the people are not in the church or maybe not know any religion at all, they're going to see changes. But maybe at the same time, believers will be empowered with knowledge that was kind of previously held back, but it will be the knowledge that may get them through the changes that are coming, the tidal wave of change.
Well, that's what I've been thinking too. I've been praying a lot, man. I've been like, God, why? I mean, am I crazy? I mean, there's plenty of people out there calling me crazy. They think I'm the village idiot. Okay, fine, whatever. Think whatever you want. I'm told to test all things. If you're going to condemn before investigation, then you're really the one that's the idiot. Because you're perched on top of Mount Ignorance, throwing rocks in a glass house. Meanwhile, I'm searching this out and I'm praying. I'm like, Lord, why is this coming up now? Why after 500 years is this whole subject being revisited when we supposedly have so much apparent evidence of the globe? And what keeps coming back to me is, okay, but where is that evidence coming from? And if you were to ask yourself, how do you know you're on a spinning heliocentric globe? You're going to have to say, well, because of my public schools, because the church who believes in modern science, because of NASA, the government, and the military. And in every one of those cases, you're taking what people who have been proven to be liars. Is there a government on this planet that's trustworthy? No. Militaries take their orders from governments, so C, number one. Right. NASA has proven itself to be not trustworthy on more than one occasion.
Absolutely.
And if you were educated in a church or a school that takes their marching orders or information from NASA, the government, or the military, well, how credible is that source? And so this is why I'm trying to tell people, like, use your senses. Go out and do tests that don't require NASA, the government, or the military to confirm your test. And I was in Malibu meeting with another guy who's helping me with the scripts, and he says, I got to tell you something, Rob. He says, I've been watching your research on this flat Earth stuff. I used to be a lifeguard on Ventura Beach, and he said on a clear day, we could look out 20 miles across and see the Anacapa Arch. It's one of those island arches, you can drive a ship through it. Well, he says, that's 20 miles out. He said, the math says that I shouldn't be able to see it. I said, can you confirm the math? Like, do you know any college-level professors or any, math teachers? He goes, yeah, I do. I said, well, don't tell him what you're really asking. Just give him the math problem. So he did. He asked the math professor, on a sphere, 25,000 miles circumference, if an object is 40 feet high and 20 miles away, how far below my ability to see it should it be? The guy did the math, and it says like 200 and something feet below your ability to see it. So you're saying if this object is 20 miles out, 40 feet high, it should be about 200 feet below my ability to see it. Yep, that's correct. He says, well, the problem is we've all seen it. And the math professor says, what do you mean? He says, the Anacapa Arch. All of a sudden you're hearing the Flintstone sound effect as the professor turns around and looks at the blackboard and scratches his head going, how in the world is that possible? See, this is what we all need to be doing.
Well, at best,
that's why I'm questioning it.
Well, at best, their math is off. At worst, they're flat out lying.
Right. The globe is wrong, and I don't need NASA, the military, the government to tell me that when I look across a reservoir and see my 4x8 sheet of colored plywood, the math says it should be curved, and I shouldn't be able to see it. Math doesn't lie. Governments, military, NASA do.
I think that is coming more and more clearer. They in fact do lie, and I mean we spent a whole show on government lies, and they just keep coming out. It just one lie after another. It's like I don't even want to hear it anymore because, like I said earlier, if they tell you something, just imagine the opposite and start from that point. Because there's a method to their madness. They are manipulating us. They are perverting us. They have a long-term agenda. And the only way we can break through is have shows like this and questions like this, shows like yours, ask questions that even seem ridiculous because, accepted norms, because the accepted norms were generated by these same people. And so, accepted beliefs. Now, norms, I'll stay away from that, but the accepted beliefs, they have a reason why they're doing that. It keeps them in power and keeps us subjected to them, and I don't like it, Rob.
I don't either, and the fact that you're seeing even the President Obama, on several occasions, when they're trying to push forward this climate change, whatever they're trying to do at climate change, they always say, we don't have time for a meeting with the flat earthers. Like, there's a lot of idioms you could use for saying somebody's stupid. Why is it that this particular idiom, you must believe in the flat earth, is always being tagged to anything to do with climate change? And supposedly 500 days till climate change was announced, several months ago, and that 500 days ends in September. So, is this the reason why flat earth is coming to the surface? Because people are actually looking into it. And if flat earth is true, then all your global warming crap goes out the window too.
Well, he's lying. I mean, that's one area. You can also take the fast track authority for negotiations for trade, and they're not even letting the people read the bill. So I mean, there's so much lying and conniving going on, man. It's just like we really, the people out here in internet land, we have to discover the truth for ourselves because it's not going to come to us. It's going to be spoon-fed to us, and it's going to be a lie. And it's like the Matrix is so true. We're just, they're just using us to facilitate their power. And I think just asking these questions is enough to aggravate them. If all we can do is aggravate them, then I'm for that. If that's the least we can do, I'm for the aggravate. Rather than replace them. If we can't replace them, let's aggravate them.
Yeah. Get them, NASA's already chasing behind a bunch of us truthers and replacing photographs as we expose them. So keep them busy.
Exactly. Well, Rob, I've got your website again back in our background, the testingtheglobe.com. Tell folks what they can find there. I was looking at the scriptures. Wow, people will just read through there. Just look at those scriptures you've talked about. But talk a little bit about that website before we go.
Yeah, well, these blogs are really long, so I have done a number of YouTube videos where I actually read it, and you can watch me, scrolling down the page. So if you don't want to read all that, you can watch plenty of videos. And the most recent one I did was called Flat Earth, A Doctor and the Village Idiot. And that was my response to everybody calling me a village idiot. And I said, okay, fine. If you don't want to believe in the village idiot, listen to Dr. Michael Heiser. And I got a clip on there of him walking through the scriptures, saying the same thing I said, but he's got letters after his name, so everybody believes him.
Okay, well, Rob Skiba, has been a great time with you here on the Edge Television broadcast. Can we have you on again sometime, especially when we get some more updates of things in projects you're involved with?
Absolutely, brother. Love to.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on the show and talk about these. By the way, I'm coming out in the show. I'm coming out. I don't care what people think about me. I'm going flat Earth. I'm just coming out, man.
Good for you. Good for you, bro.
Okay. All right, Rob. Stay safe under the dome, man. We'll be talking with you.
Okay. See you, man.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was Rob Skiba talking about testing the globe. Which theory is correct, the flat Earth or the globe Earth? How about discovering the truth for yourself? And there's a lot of information out there that you can go and look up and make your own decision. Every topic, everything that you believe needs to be challenged. Test all things, prove all things, and that way you will not be manipulated. Nobody likes to be controlled by the government or any other organization. Free your mind. That's what we say here at the Edge Television broadcast. Next week, we're going to have with us back Greg Rinsich talking about the alien, android, reptilian invasion still happening. And I don't know whether they're walking on top of the dome or how they're going to drop in, parachute in or something. We're going to find out from Greg next week, 2 weeks. Donald Ware, retired United States Air Force, we're going to be talking about the the worldwide conspiracy, the governance behind the governance that we see, somebody's pulling the strings, especially that Obama. You know, he's got stitches on the side of his head. If you see some of the photographs, Manchurian candidate, maybe we'll find out from the Donald Ware, the retired Air Force personnel there. Hey, if we haven't had somebody on the program you'd like to see interviewed in the Edge style, just drop us a line. Or if there's a topic that we haven't covered here on the program, just drop us a line. Other than that, the show will begin to replay here in just a few minutes in our main player. We'll extract the high-definition video, put it in the pop-up player as well. It'll play all week there, and also in the pop-up player there in Rob's bio section, as well as put it in our TuneIn.com playlist and TuneIn Radio. Daniel Ott for The Edge. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Edge with Daniel Ott. To subscribe to The Edge newsletter, log on to theedgeam.com. That's theedgeam.com, where you can find out about our guests and topics discussed on the air. The Edge has been brought to you by EBN, the Edge Broadcasting Network, providing affordable live web streaming to the world. Visit EBN at ebnlive.net. That's ebnlive.net. Until next week, for The Edge broadcast, I'm Chris Moore. See you on The Edge.